Right, our first step when we start with the compass is to put the two points together, and the pivot point, the metal part, should line up with the end of your pencil. If it's not lined up right and it looks like this, it's not going to work. So you have to unscrew this and then move the pencil so that it touches the metal tip, and then tighten the screw. Okay, now first step, we're copying a segment. To copy the segment, we have two endpoints. One endpoint's the pivot point, one endpoint's your pencil. Okay, you stretch your compass out until the pencil's on one endpoint and the pivot point's on the other. Okay, then you're going to make a tiny little arc. You can either do this by holding the pivot side firmly and just twisting it to make a little arc, or you can hold your compass still, holding the pivot side firmly, and make a little arc by twisting your paper. Whatever size you have, you pick it up, put the pivot point on the end point, and you just make a little arc over here. That tells you that this segment is the same exact size as this one. It says label the new segment AB, so this is A, this is B. To show that these segments are congruent, we're going to draw a congruency mark on each of them. The next one says construct the midpoint. In order to find the midpoint, you need to find the perpendicular bisector. So in order to do this, we put the pivot point on one end, we stretch the compass out to anything bigger than about halfway. If we were to estimate, that's about half, so I just have to go anything farther than halfway. Okay, I hold the pivot point down firmly, and you can either turn your paper like this. Okay, you need the arc to go above and below so it looks like a semicircle, half a circle. Okay, or you could hold your paper still and try to spin your compass, but for some people that's harder to do. Whatever size you just used, you have to keep it the same exact size. You just flip it around, put your pivot point on the other end, and you do the exact same thing from the other end. You'll know you did it correctly if your arcs meet up at the top and at the bottom. If you didn't do it correctly, so like for example, if I made this too tiny, my arcs are never going to cross like this. Okay. Once you've got your two arcs in these intersection points, you line them up with the edge of something straight. A ruler, a piece of paper, something that's straight, and you connect them. Okay, that cuts this segment in half. It says label the midpoint M. That's M. The directions don't say we have to mark it perpendicular, but we could. Okay, it is perpendicular. Next one, we're copying an angle. In order to copy an angle, the first thing you have to do is you have to make an arc that goes through the angle. You put your pivot point on the vertex, and any size you want, you make an arc. Whatever size you want. Whatever size you just used, you're copying. So if I copy something, I do the same exact thing. I pick up my compass, I put the pivot point over here, and I make an arc again. Okay, so now this arc and this arc are the same size. Okay, so now to figure out how big the angle is, I've got an intersection point here and an intersection point here. I'm going to see how wide my angle is by putting the pivot point on one of those intersections and the pencil on the other. So you're going to have to adjust your compass. You might have to make it smaller, you might have to make it bigger, but you need the pencil to touch one of them and you need the pivot point to touch the other. You could do it this way or you could do it this way. Okay, it doesn't matter. You just need that distance. So if I get that distance, I make a tiny little arc just to make sure I'm in the right spot. Okay, that it's crossing that intersection, and I'm copying. So I pick up my compass and I go to the exact same point over here where the arc met the angle, and I make a little arc. That little spot where they intersected is going to be the same as this spot because I copied it. So now I just connect these. Okay, when you're copying something, you're doing the exact same thing from one to the other. All right, bisect. Bisect means I'm going to cut it in half. Okay, in order to cut it in half, I first need an arc. So the same first step for copying an angle and bisecting. You make, oops, my water bottle got in the way. You make an arc. Okay, made an arc. You do not have to change the size. You have two new pivot points now. Wherever this touched, those are your new pivot points. So from one of them, you make an arc. And then keep the size the same, don't change it. And from the other one, you make an arc. Now some people the other day when we did this, they made really big arcs. They did something like this. And they did something like this. If you do that, you're going to get two intersection points. You only need one of them. Okay? So wherever this intersected, that's the middle of the angle. So I connect the middle of the angle to the vertex, and that means I cut it in half.